It's just important the desert is yellow and can't possibly have water. That is true. It would not have water. However, you would get people making oasis vaults. You realize that, of course. There would definitely be oasis vaults, but yeah, I agree, and the layout would not have water. Flaming corpses, sun demons, smoke demons, thorn hunters, swamp worms, elemental packs. Is it the sandstorms? Yeah, I mean, you can, when I started revamping or thinking about revamping Swamp when Elliptic pointed out this thing where like there's no kind of like unifying monster profile to the swamp monsters. They just sort of feel like random. Like some swamp monsters are Spriggans that have ridiculous EV and are fast. Some swamp monsters are like heavy AC sort of tanks. There's not sort of like a commonality to them, and that was sort of his suggestion. And I'm not sure if you're probably not really going for that with the desert proposal, but I'm sort of curious, aside from like the terrain thing, you mentioned how there was going to be like some diving aspect to it. I don't know if you were actually serious about that. A branch that is a non-water branch is, I think, people would be happy about that, but there's also sort of like a question of what about it is, aside from the flavor, like what about it is like mechanistically kind of unique. Oh, no, I don't think I said it was dumb. I don't know that I actually fully understood what it would be. I think the discussion was just that it would be very distinct in that it would be the only branch that had this kind of like system to it. I mean, maybe other branches could also have it, and that would maybe actually be kind of interesting. That was actually a thing that Pleasing Fungus was really wanting to do with branches. He wanted to like make them more feel like they have like a, Spider has this thing where you get rushed with all these relatively weak mobs of fast-moving monsters, and sort of Orc has this like popcorn monster feel to it. Some of those are kind of weak sauce, but there's like some kind of unifying mechanism going on there. He was all about that, so he would probably support this idea. And so it's potentially interesting if it feels like it works, but I don't know what the actual thing would be. What am I doing right now? Aside from taking a bunch of damage, apparently. Pause to wax on about game design. You go upstairs and rest. That's a good idea. Harder. Yeah, I feel like some of that stuff is fairly radical, yet at the same time some things that people would have maybe been wanting to do and are scared of doing those kind of things because they don't want it to be too annoying. But at the same time, people kind of feel like that maybe the formula of like, okay, just throw a layout generator, throw a monster set that has like some kind of loose connection, and there's your branch. That formula, which is most of the branches all feel like that, is kind of stale. So maybe exploring some of that stuff is kind of where the game actually does need to go. It would potentially be very different than other stuff that's in the game. But if the stuff that gets made in terms of like unique branch effects really works, then that's kind of where it has to be, is like if it's novel but it feels like it's mostly annoying, or actually doesn't introduce much in the way of like strategy, not going to be as well received. But if it does feel like it really adds something to the gameplay, then more radical changes like that might have a chance of going somewhere. But yeah, if you do write something up, at minimum it'd be interesting to read. So Mikey, who's his Twitch username Crack Whore, is a longtime crawl player and has contributed some stuff to some of the game's design ideas. The Borgenjor's Vile Clutch spell was his idea, and so he proposed that, and I implemented that. And Dithmenos, the god, was also his something that he designed. I think Grunt implemented that one. It's actually a change in trunk that has happened, is that Dithmenos no longer has his fire conduct, so now Dith no longer restricts fire spells, doesn't care about fiery monsters, or doesn't dislike use of fire in general. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Forest didn't even really have any mechanics, honestly. It had this, I mean, you could sort of, like, as far as like like that unified monster idea, it had Spriggans and it had a lot of stuff it sort of got split between shoals, like the fawn monsters. I guess I don't know what their profile is. They're not particularly high EV. They're probably kind of similar to merfolk, though. I guess they are somewhat high EV, but I don't know. But it had all the fawn monsters, it had thorn hunters, it had those water-based plant shooting monsters that got removed. It had shambling, well, they weren't called shambling mangroves, they were they called treants? I think they were called that, but they were basically the same monster. And then it had all the Spriggan monsters, actually more Spriggan monsters, some of which got removed, like Spriggan Enchanter monsters and some other ones that didn't work out so hot. There were quite a bit more Spriggan, so I guess at least as far as that went, it actually did have sort of a core set with the Spriggans, because there was a few more. It's just that the monsters weren't very good, and many of them got cut. Yeah, it had the ancient bear, which was like a bear with RF. That was a grunt monster. I think he was mostly going for theme there. He didn't design all the monsters in that branch. I think Draco Mega designed many of them, most of the notable ones. Although Grunt might have designed the satyr and fawn monsters. 1KB might have designed some of those as well. But yeah, Forest was this branch that was alternating with Crypt. And it basically had this like foresty layout that was just like a lot of clumps of trees. I mean, it was sort of fine, but it wasn't really interesting. And it also played hell with vaults because of the way the layout placed plants interfered with vault placement a lot. And it was a real hassle. And so it had pretty samey levels that weren't too interesting, and then maybe a few monster designs that were kind of okay and a bunch that weren't. So eventually the branch got scrapped, and the monsters that we felt worked relatively well got moved to the layer branches. Trunk Magic Forest. I don't know what you mean by Magic Forest. Do you mean the forest branch no longer exists. There is a vault. There are actually the old ending vaults. Okay. I don't know if you can hear my neighbor's dog. They've gotten a puppy recently, and we're gonna have to have a talk about them leaving the dog unattended because it's basically barking constantly when they're not home. It's a barking machine. I don't know how. It's not that young of a puppy, but it's like young enough where it's like it's figured out how to bark, and that's what it's gonna do. It'll like sit there and bark for like 3 hours on end if they're not home. Yeah, I've got Frank or Z barking in my ear for 3 hours. I think they're students, so like they're probably gone for. I know, I always hate that. Like people, they get a dog and they don't really know how to like deal with that. There's only so much you can do when your dog barks when it's penned up, but it's kind of rough because it's an apartment complex, so I'll have to go have a talk with them at some point. Guys, please. So we got an acquirement scroll. So yeah, anyhow, the forest branch got removed, but some of the monsters got put into layer branches. Over time, they got tweaked. A couple of them got eventually removed from the layer branches too. And forest, the branch just went nowhere. But layer branches are just one of those areas where nobody's really ever happy with them. They've gotten shortened a bunch. They used to be 5 levels, now they're 4. I feel like they could afford to be like 3 levels, to be perfectly honest. Is this spell actually gonna... Oh, it's not really gonna work. I know if I cast this, it's gonna miss them. Yep. Oh, got lucky. So yeah, I set up an acquire poll so people can vote on what I acquire. I actually don't. I would like maybe a Staff of Energy. I would honestly. I need kind of like a channeling resource. I would like it, and I don't have a crystal ball, which is unusual. Usually those things drop like candy, I feel. Not this time. Oh, yep, you would do that, wouldn't you? Yeah, you can see how much damage that guy did to me just there. Those things don't mess around. I don't have any RLEC, but still. What's up, Nope? How's it going, man? Here's Mikey's favorite strat, Sublime and Regen. I have been using that a bit more. The satisfying part of that is like you get a ton of MP back, so you don't mind the fact that you're having to cast Regen and rest. Thanks, Nope. I don't know what Vermintute is. Is that a game? It's your kill, dude. That's Mikey's Sif Muna right there. Is sublimation of blood plus regen. It is an effective strat. It's scary with Deep Elf. It's less scary if if I had 200 HP, it's a little bit less frightening. I actually don't have very good Necro right now. It's working reasonably well though. I guess it's because, yeah, I don't know if there's like an ideal spell power to have with Sublime. Yeah, sometimes it just does nothing, so I probably could stand to have some more Necromancy. Well, I don't think it's bad on any character, really. Like, the most relative... I mean, a Spriggan or a Felid might be an example where you actually really got to be careful just because your HP are so very low. Even then, I could still use it on those. But a Sprig and Felid can mostly run away and rest, so they kind of have less need for it. But I'm using it to pretty good effect on a deep elf who has pretty low HP, so I think it's actually a pretty good spell to use, but you have to use it judiciously. You can't, you know, it's not a spam thing where you, in the sense that you don't pay attention to what your HP are. You really do. You gotta watch it. Here's the Iron Dagon. One-way entrance into the... Oh, there's another vault up here. I should probably check this out. I know this one. This is like a hell entrance or pan entrance or something. Oh, god damn it. Well, where did you guys go? But yeah, we're sort of entertaining ideas for revamping some of those layer branches. I kind of informally had a project to revamp Swamp, and mostly sort of started from a conversation I had with Elliptic about. He mentioned how he liked it the least. He said actually he didn't mind the layout too much, but other people had kind of criticized the way water places in that branch. In particular, and the way it randomly places it as being like especially annoying. But Elliptic was talking about how he didn't really like the monster set as much. So I mentioned that to Mikey, and I think he just sort of started brainstorming. He's probably thinking about it at some point before that, but started sort of brainstorming what would actually be a fun branch. Our 8 armor. So I kind of want to see. Kind of want to see what'll happen if I try those fire dragon scales. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the funny thing about layer branches. I feel like they're the least loved of. I mean, there's the Abyss, but that's like not even a real branch. As far as like the mainstay branches, I feel the layer branches that are not slime. Like people kind of like slime because it's. I guess it's a sort of a gimmicky one where you don't clear it, you sort of dive it, and that feels sort of fun. And at least the final level fight is sort of memorable. But people don't really have historically never really liked layer branches too much. Maybe they've tolerated them, but I feel they've never really been liked. Yeah, that's a good point. That's maybe that kind of unifying monster theme that Elliptic was going for. Like, it's not too hard to fight those slimes just to kill them, but they sure can kill you fairly well. Even the way it uses slime creatures, I mean, that might be one of the worst things about it, but I feel like it actually works all right. Like, they sort of complicate the fight, and they are popcornish, but they do kind of a really nice job of like becoming not popcorn if they gang up on you. I mean, it may not be the best thing, but it's one of the more effective uses of like a monster that's sort of by then relatively, trivial by the time you would actually do the branch. But they manage to be pretty scary if you don't manage them correctly. Doesn't really have too many special crazy gimmicks in it aside from, I guess, Shining Eyes. every pan monster with slime creatures. That would be a very good bug. That reminds me of like something you would see in NetHack where like, you genocided all the monsters and there's nothing but like ants left somehow. Sounds like something from that game. Yeah, I could see that being pretty funny and also somewhat terrifying. Shatter. Is that a sign? Go for Shatter. Spriggan Berserkers. I don't know if these existed before. I want to say that these were forest monsters. Spriggan Defenders definitely did exist. And Spriggan Riders existed. I'm not sure if Spriggan Berserkers. I think they were forest monsters. And when they got moved, I think they just got moved to depths. Yeah, they didn't show up in any branches. I guess it was decided they were too much. They're not like terrible monsters, honestly. They're kind of not in the right branch though. I mean, they're very like, yeah, this feels like a very grunt monster. It's sort of very like player symmetry. I mean, it's sort of interesting how they summon berserk things. They would be kind of a cool rare lair monster maybe. I don't know. I guess they're just too hard to kill in lair. But they're kind of just too easy in depths. Spriggan Defenders are more like properly a depths monster because there's not much interesting going on with Spriggan Defenders. They're just like crazy defenses and quite a lot of damage output. Used to summon Berserk Stone Giants. Well, that would be pretty frightening. Oh yeah, I've got this acquirement scroll. I never checked the poll, which was obviously very important. Looks like Francofacie stopped barking for now. Jewel 3 votes. It's almost hard to read. Staff 2 votes. Evo 1 vote. Wow, these are really somewhat sensible votes. Although Jewelry, I can't really agree with that. Oh no, he's still barking. Never mind. It's just the music is over. So yeah, Staff could possibly get me Staff of Energy. Evo could possibly get me Crystal Ball of Energy. Elliptic is kind of a defender of Crystal Ball of Energy as well. I was something I used in older versions of Crawl doing 15 runes because you could wear Clarity and it was basically a really free way to channel like infinity mana very easily, so you could just Firestorm absolutely everything. You can never say no to Wand of Acid. Yeah, it's less likely to give me Wand of Acid because I've already seen it. I've seen, I think, all of... That's actually kind of a good question. Which ones? What am I likely... I could seriously... Okay, so I have seen all the wands, and I have seen all the other evoker types, and all the fixed ones. Have I seen... Oh, maybe I haven't seen Sack of Spiders. It's a little bit unfortunate. Yeah, it's kind of a fun item, to be honest. It is really quirky, and the draining part sort of turns people off a lot, but it's pretty effective if you pump up. If you have a Staff of Energy, I feel it's particularly pretty good. Although you might be able to just use Sublime, but I think it drains you to 0 MP, so you can be kind of stuck. You could combo Staff of Energy with Sublime pretty well, though. What? Oh yes, fire. I am carrying it. Sea Blink, Firestorm, 9%. So that armor training and I guess my strength point helped a lot. That's still a pretty high miscast rate though. And not very good for controlled blink either. Maybe I will go for a bit more. I feel it's not actually going to help too much getting a couple more levels to get that down. But I definitely want, yeah, maybe we can clear, I guess I could probably go ahead and clear Vaults 5 as well. Yeah, that's true, right. Yeah, so many things have changed, and also like Haste Wand and spammable heal wounds. A lot of those really broken things have changed, so like it's maybe not so. The lack of clarity means that I mean, I've got 25 curing potions. Wait, oh hey, I could use that BBC, that's kind of cool. I need to train some earth. We'll try like 12 before I finally switch over. So I guess we'll go down. Well, alright then. Oh, that was a pretty good bolt of fire. Anti-magic Logitong. I was wondering why that was happening. So yeah, the some of the players I like to talk to, Mikey, Elliptic, a lot of sort of older school players who've been playing the game since like really old versions, but even newer players who are just who like to, you know, who kind of understand the game pretty well. They might have some, they might not all agree with each other, but it's good to talk to all these different people to get ideas. Kind of how we, oops, I don't know why I just walked backwards, but whatever. Most of the devs that spend time doing design work these days, like I was saying, play the game quite a bit. So for a lot of things, we don't really have to, you know, consult necessarily, but it's almost always better if we... Oh, okay. I thought that was Necronomicon at first, but it wasn't. So getting Necro Mutation is still an option for this character. Yeah, it is the Stone Soup way. It's a very player-driven game, and it's sort of shifted over the versions from like a lot more sort of wacky, zany flavor stuff to more like play to win. That sounds awful when you phrase it like that, but just like honing down the design and removing stuff that's just exists for that's bad gameplay that doesn't add much flavor consideration. But there's more and more of like a group of good players out there that can offer their opinions, and the developers doing design themselves are some of those players, so it's kind of like shifted. Not everybody loves that, but that's sort of the kind of the design ethos of the game right now, or has been for quite some time. Oh boy.